at an individual level and then at a operational level, as well as on a market level, things are not fixed anymore. Things are now fluid. And as such, you have to realize that while everything is changing, you're going to be changing.
Even before the pandemic, the modern working world was in constant flux. Today, change is the only constant. Navigating these shifts requires being agile, or as Connie Steele says, fluid.
But because of that, if the world is in constant motion, you're constantly redefining who you are because you're trying to figure out what fits. And that's natural. And that's going to change depending on where you are in your life stage. That you will need to be able to be fluid in the way you think and the way you do to gain the most traction out of any situation, any circumstance.
Fluidity is the way of the future. And adopting a fluid mindset and approach may not happen overnight. That's why Connie illuminates how to do this and apply fluidity to build your dream career in her upcoming book, Building the Business of You.
Welcome to Strategic Momentum, the podcourse with actionable tips, inspiring stories, and practical advice from progressive leaders on what it takes to break through business and career inertia and understand the business of work. I'm your host, Connie Steele.
I'm Strategic Momentum's Marketing Manager, Alexis Anthony.
And I'm Podcast Operations Manager, Alan Corcoran.
If you've been following along on social media and in our email newsletters, you'll know that in just a few days, Connie will be releasing her much anticipated book, Building the Business of You, a system to align passion and potential through your own career mashup.
It's the first book to help professionals and entrepreneurs navigate the uncertain post-pandemic world of work while aligning personal purpose and professional advancement.
So today, Alan and I are flipping the script on Connie and asking her to give us a preview of the book, as well as tell us a little more about herself and her own career journey.
We're asking her all the familiar questions you're used to, like how she's overcome inertia and how her experiences have shaped her career and business philosophies. Then we'll dig into the concepts in the book and the inspiration behind it.
Building the Business of You releases on February 11th, and you can go to bizofyou.co, that's bizofyou.co, to learn more and to get your copy.
All right, now let's begin with Connie's career journey.
All right, well, thanks, Connie, for joining us today.
Thank you. And now I guess we're flipping the scripts. You guys get to interview me this time.
So it would be great if you could share your career journey and those important milestones that led you to where you are today.
So I am a Chinese American born to immigrant parents. And as such, academics were a focus in our household, particularly mathematically oriented subjects, sadly true to the stereotype. So in college, I pursued a heavily quantitative degree. Math was a prerequisite. I had to get a math degree, but there was also an expectation to double major. I had no idea what that was going to be, sampled a lot of different quantitative disciplines based on the direction that my dad had pushed me in. He happens to have a PhD in economics and statistics. So I actually landed with statistics, funny enough, and he was very happy with that. I liked it only because I could see a relevant application of math to real world situations. But that next path, after just getting my degree, I knew was graduate school. That was the expectation also, was to go to graduate school. However, I had no idea what I wanted to do with a degree in math and statistics. So that began my journey of trying to identify, what do I want to do with my life? And I felt that I had to actually have that figured out early, or there was this pressure and expectation to do so. So true story, I went to the library, looked up some vocational books, and learned about marketing. And a light bulb went off. I absolutely loved the discipline because I could finally see how the quantitative side, these numbers, this analysis of really people and their behavior could be used to make decisions on the products and services that were on store shelves, that are in the advertising that we see. So I realized, wait, I can use this math and statistics degree, specifically statistics, to marketing. And there's a field for that called marketing research. So bingo, like, okay, that's it. I am going to apply to graduate school to get a degree in statistics. But before I fully committed to that, I decided to take a marketing class to see if my hunch was right. I did. I loved it. I learned all about brand management. I learned about the 4 Ps, as everybody knows. I learned about how products were brought to market, the whole ideation element of it, concepting, advertising, and so forth. So I was set. I knew what I wanted to do, applied to those schools, got into graduate school, went to University of Michigan for an applied statistics degree specifically. So after that, I knew that I wanted to go to a consumer packaged goods company because that's where the really premier jobs were in the field. And up until that point, my career path was very linear and sequential, where you identify what you do in college, you link that to what you want to do in graduate school, which can then lead you to that career path. So I was fortunate enough to land a job at a top CPG company, learned a lot, but struggled.
Connie's struggles came about as she was unprepared for the big picture dynamics in her company. School had not taught her to effectively navigate the office politics that often decide who make it in the corporate world. Not only did these factors put her in uncomfortable situations, they also led her to underperform in the eyes of management. Fortunately, she was able to leverage her soft skills by asking people for help, and in doing so, she started to build her village. This helped to elevate her to the next level, at which point she began to look for other opportunities to engage her right brain after being on the left brain path for so long.
Really enjoyed it initially because I got a chance to apply the skills that I had learned to real world situations, but certainly augmented my learning to see what it was like in market. But I quickly got bored. This is when the internet was big. And I was seeing how quickly consumer behavior was changing as a result of it, including my own. I also saw how products, services, and experiences were brought to market so much faster than the industry that I was in. So I knew that where I was, while it was stable, while it was a great company, where it was a place where many chose to stay for the rest of their career, it wasn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to move into technology. I knew that was the future. But the other piece is I got exposed to marketing. I got to see how the creative side worked. And I had always been naturally creative, but had been forced down a very quantitative path. I saw an opportunity to make, honestly, a career pivot. So I took advantage of it and started to pursue marketing opportunities in the internet industry and was fortunate enough to land a job at AOL. I'd spent the next about 8 years of my career at AOL in a variety of positions and roles, from initially e-commerce. As soon as I landed at AOL, I just loved it. It felt like a newfound freedom. It felt as if I could be creative. I could try. I could, frankly, be entrepreneurial. That wasn't a common term necessarily. I mean, yes, you were seeing entrepreneurs all over the place, but to be an intrapreneur, I should say, which is a trait that many large organizations are looking for now, but to bring this ability to ideate on new things, establish that plan, get the green light to just do it and try it, is really liberating. That wasn't something that was common or you really had the ability to do in the other industries I had worked in, because there was a very specific, sequential process to making decisions, to bring ideas to life. And it was called stage gate, or critical pathing was the decision-making process. And it started off with what you call sort of like this big bang. I mean, you have a lot of ideas, but they all got whittled down. It was one gate to another gate to another gate. So everybody had their place. There was one process. That's the way it worked. You couldn't really veer off of that. And it was also an environment where there was a much more hierarchical structure. So you really couldn't have the freedom to potentially pursue other things. And further, there wasn't the technology available in which I could go off and do my own entrepreneurial thing, where it is prevalent for many people today. So being at AOL, where at a young age, relatively speaking, you have people in their 20s who were leading major projects, who were bringing their creative sparks and juices and ideas to life and working across different disciplines, people in all these different functions, coming together to map out a plan and launching it and realizing, wait, but we could change this. It's not all permanent. We can change the color. We can change the copy. I mean, it wasn't so fixed. And that was incredibly refreshing. So at the time, it was really exciting being involved in online shopping and seeing how people were changing their behavior to buy anything and everything online. I then also had the opportunity to work in retail partner marketing. So all the discs, those of you who remember the AOL discs that were in the store, but being able to create the promotions and the campaigns for acquisition in the different stores that we were in. But I also then got bored and wanted to get back to really being involved in building products, because I had done that during my days at the CPG company, and that was at General Mills. So I had an opportunity to go work in another group that was, I'd say, like a product marketing function, when that term product marketing wasn't really common, but it was almost an internal marketing consulting strategy group working with the product team, working to ideate and conceive different product ideas to life, which I love, but also then worked in other areas, in innovation, in international product management, working to really create international portals. So had a pretty varied experience at AOL, which was wonderful. Got a chance to test and learn. So every year and a half, admittedly, there were layoffs all the time too. So you had to pivot and learn a new job. But that environment enabled me to test and learn and try a lot of different areas to see what I liked, but also to build skill sets along the way. I then moved on to another technology company and learned the whole process of brand development from beginning to end. And then my last corporate job was running marketing for a startup company. And that was a real interesting experience, where it was the first opportunity, or I should say, in that experience, my entire team was virtual. So 11 years ago, I had to figure out virtual when virtual really wasn't a thing with my entire team. I was in the office, but everybody else was virtual. But that said, after in that experience, while I had the opportunity to learn quite a bit, it was challenging, and that the commute was long, it's very demanding. The environment was quite toxic. Trying to juggle my job as a member of the C-suite and having a new team, trying to build them up, having 2 young children, it became very clear that this path had its limits, had its challenges, and I wasn't able to be present for my kids. I felt it was a situation in which I had to choose between my work life and my personal life. At that point, I made the decision to make another pivot, and it was to pivot out of corporate, to find more flexibility, to regain more control over my career or really my own life, because I knew how hard it was to separate work and home, that I chose to go into consulting. And at that time, it wasn't common to just leave a job and not have something lined up. But at that point, I realized that I had to make a change for me and for my family. So since then, I have been running my own consulting business, and that's been almost 9 years now.
It's fair to say that Connie's early experiences, her education, first job at a CPG company, and work in the tech space were very formative years. She was developing skills while constantly seeking opportunities to learn and grow and facing challenges head on. These experiences would eventually culminate in her expertise as a consultant, allowing her to pull from the many roles she's held to help companies break through their own inertia. So now we dig into Connie's present. Today, she's parallel pathing being a consultant, business leader, podcaster, and now author, not to mention being a mom, among other jobs. Let's take a look at how the trends she's observed in the workforce and in your own life have ultimately led to the development of building the business of you.
I've helped mid-sized companies, Fortune 500 companies, even startup companies scale up their marketing and strategy efforts in order to get to the level and the growth that they want to be at. And it's been an amazing experience because it's given me the opportunity to sample a lot of industries, meet a lot of people, build various skills in a way that I'm not sure I could have in a very linear corporate job. But more than anything, it's also given me the opportunity to try other things outside of the consulting business, to be able to mentor startups, to honestly even create my own podcast as part of wanting to provide thought leadership content. As a marketer, everybody knows that content is critical, and being able to develop content that reflects your thought leadership is key. I knew that the content needed to be more than just about my point of view, only because that wasn't authentic to me. I love learning about other people, their perspectives, their strategies, their approaches, and realize that to create traction and breakthrough challenges, particularly in any kind of consulting environment, it's more than just a subject matter expertise. It's really about understanding the entire environment. So I decided to, start off with a small test. And that was actually with you, Alexis, too, to create content that would help illuminate the challenges that many have in a corporate environment or really just a work situation. And it would cover a broad range of topics and have the opportunity to have guests that reflect a lot of different disciplines. But it was all about understanding what typically would get people stuck and why. And then fundamentally, what to do about it. It was really focused on the how, because for me, it became clear that many understood what the problem may have been or may be in their situation or in their environment. The real issue is, how do you break through in order to create that momentum? And so I wanted to unpack that. I wanted to dive deeper into getting those great tips, advice, and stories to do so. And so that led me to establishing and creating the Strategic Momentum podcast, which we are now in our 4th year. And we've had the opportunity to interview some amazing people, from award-winning authors and leading psychologists to incredible entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. And as a part of this entire process of interviewing people, going back to my research roots, after interviewing over 100 people, I also started to see a pattern in how many were viewing their career, their approach to their career, and how they were looking to reshape it. So that became the foundation for this book that is coming out, because I've always been a student of the future of work. I've always been fascinated by it and have stayed close to researching, observing, analyzing what's been going on. Understand what defines career success today. What do people want out of their career? What holds them back? Yet, what are those factors that can advance them forward? So these desires to dig into why, because of the changing dynamics of work, because of what I had seen in terms of shifts across generations over the years, and even in my own journey, was a catalyst to want to quantitatively assess that, which led to a survey that we did last summer, which we have dubbed the State of Work and Career Success. And all of that too has led to us creating a course to support people in their journey and trying to define, what they want out of their life, to align their passion and their purpose to achieve their growth potential. And this all led to the development of my upcoming book, Building the Business of You.
So it sounds like, even though you said that your early career was pretty linear, you really were testing and learning the entire time. And you'd mentioned this maybe in some of the roles you had where you're testing and learning as a part of your job function. But really, you've been doing this your whole career. And not only that, but testing, learning, and you were constantly evaluating where you were and kind of looking at what was happening around you, but also assessing what you really wanted out of your career and then adjusting based on that. So the fact that you do kind of approach things from this very kind of research oriented, you're always analyzing what's going on around you. How do you think that has shaped what you do today and how you look at all the different projects you have going on right now?
I think it's interesting when you summarize it that way. Even though I was testing and learning throughout my career, it didn't feel like it. I, at times, wasn't sure what I might have been doing. These experiences that I had, some were of my own choice, others were not. Within AOL, because there were various shifts that occurred in the organization, some of those moves into different areas was just a result of the dynamics that were going on. So I had to pivot. We all had to pivot, and we were put in a different area where I wasn't necessarily thrilled with where I was going to be. And I thought, well, why? This takes me off the path that I want. I had this somewhat linear path mapped out and wasn't thrilled about that experience. Yet what I realized, I was learning. And even though that whole time I didn't want to be doing that particular role or job for that long, the ironic thing is that in future jobs that I had or experiences, I absolutely leveraged that knowledge from those jobs I didn't like all that much. And they were so critical and so important to helping me with that new job or new opportunity. So in going through this book, it made me do this self-evaluation, which ironically I didn't. I was always researching, I think, at that moment, but hadn't done the look back and the through line of what had been happening to me, which is really hard to do when you are first starting out in your career, you're building your skills. And as you're advancing, you're just thinking future, 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 and not realizing how has everything I've done in the past, what I've liked, what I haven't, my actions, my emotions, how has that potentially fed where I've chosen to go, what I've enjoyed doing, and where I may want to go. So that was just somewhat of an epiphany for me. And I realized part of writing this book in the first place has been a journey to maybe somewhat explain what has been going on with me and my choices throughout my career. and the way I look at the world of work, it is very much about sampling, experiencing, a broad range of areas. But what I've learned is that when I focus too much on one particular area for too long, I tend to then get bored and feel a pull towards wanting to do something else that reflects a completely different side of me. So, for example, I had spent so many years doing heavy quantitative analysis and mastered it and enjoyed it because it was a new skill and I was growing. But at some point, I was yearning for really the creative side, the right brain type of activities. And when I got exposed to that, there was a pull to want to move into that. So when I had those opportunities, I would then veer to that direction. But in a lot of the roles I had in the past, it was one thing or the other. Rarely could I do both at the same time and leverage really all of me, the whole brain of me, not just right brain, left brain, but whole brain. And that was something that didn't become clear to me probably until I started to analyze what was going on in the world of work and how were people thinking about choosing the career paths that they did. So it was, again, this insight of realizing that I didn't want to be boxed in. I wanted to sample, learn, and experience a wide variety of industries and skills because I was really curious. I knew that by learning more and understanding what was going on in these different industries and roles, that I would be building a stack of skills that could be beneficial. So I guess I realized my path was never one where it was, how do I ladder up as quickly as possible in one linear path and quickly get to the top? But I always felt that I needed to maybe go sideways and learn a different area and master that. And then switch to another one and master that and build and stack almost like Lego blocks. They might have been totally different areas, but I knew that I could, or I had this just inherent interest in understanding all these different disciplines because things are changing all the time. I didn't know that they would always converge, but inevitably they did. And it's when they did, I started to realize this is why I wanted to pursue these different areas. This is why I wasn't fully happy, is because I felt boxed into one versus another, versus being able to apply everything that I've done and I've learned into one particular role. I believe in testing and learning on a small scale because having worked in technology, I saw that agile development approach applied obviously to the products and services that were built, but realized how it was starting to permeate really just work dynamics and work life. When I started to also see that speed to market, alignment was so important with people in the consulting engagements that I had, I started to apply some of those principles to managing the projects and breaking things down into a seemingly big, hairy, scary goal or effort into something that was much more tangible, something that was much more digestible for everybody, but also ensuring that we could bring all the necessary people together to move the project forward. And a lot of those skills, really, I learned after the fact, were what were cultivated at AOL. Because when I joined, and at that time, many of the products we worked on, there was not a clear roadmap. Nobody had done it before. It was a matrix organization. So you had to work with lots of different people. You had to work collaboratively, and you had to figure out what all these different people did to drive to a common outcome. So I was conditioned to learn to think very differently, to operate outside of the box, but yet we had to act really quickly and come up with, an initial MVP, if you want to call it. So that conditioning is something that just became innate and is a mindset and approach and skill ultimately that I carried forward and everything that I did thereafter, and has become incredibly valuable, but now seems to be the default position for many that are younger and up-and-coming leaders, or even new leaders, because of technology, because of the way that technology has shaped the way that we learn and absorb information. Today, everything is a constant beta, and change is everywhere. Change is constant. Uncertainty is the new certainty. So in that situation, you have to be agile, adaptable, flexible, iterate to figure out what's going to work. And all those experiences that I had early on, I have now helped me manage through the ups and downs of my career and the ups and downs that I think all of us continue to have today.
Connie was fortunate to be at the forefront of the tech boom, where she learned that optionality, agility, and flexibility were possible for both companies and individuals. And not only were they necessary for rapid growth, they would also shape the future of work. Today, we see that many young leaders are rejecting being boxed in, just as Connie did. They are looking for flexibility and control in their careers. It's one of the many trends Connie explores in Building the Business of You. So now we'll get into the full story behind the book and the inspiration behind this and other key concepts. So Building the Business of You launches this month. Can you tell us more about that? What was the inspiration behind it? Was there a big bang moment, or is it just a collection of what you've been learning throughout your career so far?
So the book is about the trends that I've seen that are happening in this new world of work. What does it ultimately mean for careers? And fundamentally, what you can do about it. Because the dream job is really no longer something that you get. It's really something you create. And the book is about providing really practical tools to guide those who are trying to find their ideal mashup, as I like to call it, to help them achieve that. I've been a student, I guess I should say, of the future of work, or of any information or content, studies, research around the future of work, starting 10 years ago. I was very fortunate enough to have worked with a gentleman who had been the CMO of a pretty major tech company. He was one of these early gig workers. He had quit that job and had chosen to chart his own course. And he was way, way ahead of his time. And he established essentially a research and analyst consultancy with his wife, who happened to be a researcher, that was about studying the future of work, studying trends, studying small businesses. And so he was sharing his insights with me, and it just fascinated me. It tugged at this desire that I've always had to understand why. Why do things operate the way they do? Why do people choose the paths that they do? How do people become successful? In what way do they become successful? Or in what way do companies become successful? And what holds them back? And at that time too, that's when you had Elance, Odesk, these very early online marketplaces, which became Upwork, as everybody knows now. This is way before Fiverr. This is before some of these other online marketplaces. But that's where it started. That's where this interest in learning how the world of work was changing. When I chose to go off and do my own consulting business, naturally, I had to think of things differently. I wasn't in a corporate structure anymore. It wasn't defined. I had to create my own infrastructure. I had to define who I needed to be. I needed to find what my business needed to be. So that led me to continually looking at what was happening in terms of how people were looking for work, how people were able to make these new connections to drive business or to shape their business. that's where it led me to learning about other online marketplaces that skewed towards not just the inexpensive global developers or designers, but I saw this trend towards more almost management consulting type of jobs, the McKinsey-esque type of opportunities, which were evolving and occurring at the time. That consulting path helped me see that there was just a different operating mode for many people who were choosing to leave the traditional corporate job to choose whether it was starting their own business or whether just to be an independent consultant. They were crafting a whole new career for themselves and successfully doing so. And as such, by observing what was going on from a market perspective, reading about what analyst firms were talking about, interviewing several people on the podcast who also chose to take a different path, what I was seeing is that there were common patterns and themes that were emerging. And as I was starting to see these patterns and themes, it started to get me thinking, well, what's really going on? There has to be a bigger picture strategy. There has to be something that's driving it. So being the researcher, being the strategist, which is what I do in my everyday job, I had to answer that, had to figure it out. All of that led to that epiphany where I realized, wait, things are becoming much more dynamic. They're becoming, as I call it, fluid. Fluid in the way you have to think, fluid in the way you have to do, which then leads to people wanting to have optionality. People already choosing to have optionality. People choosing to parallel path their career to fulfill their whole interest, to align their purpose and passion and potential, to eventually create their own career mashup.
Connie also took particular note of how millennials were approaching their careers, not only in terms of what they were looking for, but also how they went about achieving it. Realizing what millennials wanted and were already doing eventuated in the notion of a mashup. Many were simultaneously pursuing multiple interests to fulfill their passions. Others were channeling all of their past experiences into providing incredible value to their roles because of the diversity of experiences and capabilities they possessed. So what are specific examples of those career mashups? So tell us more about the career mashup and some examples that you include in the book.
So a career mashup, as I like to define it, it is a combination of one's skills, interests, jobs, experiences, hobbies, everything that you've ever done that have been combined to really reflect you, your whole self. And it really can take two forms, one of which can be multiple jobs, could be multiple roles that you are pursuing in parallel, could be multiple income streams. So think of it as a portfolio career. I know that's a common term out there, but you are mashing that up together such that you're not defined by one thing or another thing. You know, you may be a CEO, but you may also be a nonprofit leader. You also may be a DJ on the side, or maybe you're a TEDx speaker, but you're all of those things. Another example of a mashup may be bringing your whole history of experiences and skills and so forth to bear in a particular job. And it's because of all of this breadth and depth that you have, it makes you uniquely positioned to add a different level of value in that role. A lot of that insight for that particular situation has come from what I've seen in needs of companies and also what I see as a consultant myself and where you're able to add that level of value. It's because for me as a consultant, all these different industries I've worked in, these variety of roles that I've had, these experiences I've gained, help me think through a problem in a different way. I'm able to tackle it more effectively. I'm able to move faster. I'm able to think through what is needed to align to the best solution for a client. and can think outside the box. It's a realization I found that has value. But as in many companies, while you may be hiring for one specific position, the reality is that people find this one person who may have natural talents and a bunch of other things. The manager starts to realize, wait, you could do so much more than just this specific role. It seems like you could do X, Y, and Z. We have a need for that. Might not have been obvious from the beginning, but because needs change so quickly, you now have an amazing person who can fulfill that gap. So your job function has now expanded quite a bit. And even to the point where they realize, wait, maybe you may be best in another area or a brand new role that is just emerging because of the fact that you have this experience from your past that enables you to be better prepared to immediately jump in and deliver value and create traction in a way that other people can't. So for those who might have been sampling throughout their career, there will become a point where it all intersects and you can unleash the power of everything that you know and bring the connectivity of all that insight into a role that could fully leverage it. But in many instances, it may not be obvious at first because companies are looking very specifically at a particular job. But a lot of times, many of you might have experienced this, but you go into a role and then 3 months later, 6 months later, your job changes. And then it changes again after 3 to 6 months. And it keeps on changing. You might have different bosses because the business dynamics of the company are changing. But because you can flex very easily, given all the other work that you've done in the past, it makes you pretty valuable. And it can make you very marketable. So let's use an example of somebody that everybody knows, Jennifer Lopez. We're all Jennifer Lopez now. She is not only a singer, she sang at the inauguration. Everybody knows her as a singer. But before that, folks may have known she's a dancer. She was one of the Fly Girls in that show way back when. But she started off as a dancer, but she's also an actress. She is also an entrepreneur. She's also a producer. She has expanded her career in so many different areas, and she is a multi-potentialite. She has not inhibited herself from trying all these different areas of which in the past, many people wouldn't have thought to gone into all these areas. She was a triple threat. Other examples, we have them in the NFL. So there is a football player, Justin Tucker, who is the most accurate kicker ever. Well, he happens to be a classically trained singer. He sings opera. And in this HBO Real Sports segment, he talks about how singing has been so valuable to his conditioning. It has strengthened him as an athlete because of the muscles he needs, his diaphragm, to be a better athlete at kicking, which most people would have never connected singing and football. A lot of the guests on the show also have reflected this mashup career. And it's because of their stories. That's how really this thesis, this idea, this hypothesis came to be. One of which is Mark Betry. Mark Betry is an entrepreneur, was an early entrepreneur, actually, in his teens, but he also is an author. He is a speaker. He is a course developer. He continues to reinvent himself and expand his domain. That gives him the opportunity to really reflect all of his interests. And I would say other examples are the both of you. Alexis, you're a marketer, you're a strategist, you're also a singer, you're a designer. I know you've also been a travel blogger, a writer, and a photographer. Alan, while you do social media, you are a podcast project manager, you're also a freelance comedy writer, you're a musician, you're a journalist, in fact, digital print expert. So no one wants to be defined by any one singular role anymore. Everybody wants to be able to express all the different facets of them. And it's not about being boxed in. It's about expanding who you are and reflecting who you are in all dimensions at this point.
So that leads us really to another major concept of the book, Connie, will be fluidity. I know it's part of your own work and career philosophy also. So what do you mean by fluidity and why is it important?
So the reason why I picked the word fluidity is because I felt it was the best reflection conceptually of everything that was going on, not only on a macro level and market, competition, companies, processes, work environments, but truly at an individual level. And I really wanted to connect what was happening to people at the end of the day. What was really going on with them in their own personal life that has led them down the path to where it is that they are now. And that's one of the questions I do ask in my podcast all the time. How has your career journey led you to where you are now? Based on that, what became clear is that there's been this fundamental shift from siloed, linear, sequential approach and really about conformity to one that's about being fluid, collaborative, multidimensional, multifaceted, such that it's about individuality. I think all of you can agree that over the past 10 plus years, maybe even more, it's about reflecting who you are as an individual, defining your own brand, so to speak. And as such, what you're seeing are these shifts in how, millennials, Gen Zers in particular, are defining or really not trying to specifically define themselves. I think about my role as a parent and how, in particular with this pandemic, I have to seamlessly switch between being a mom and yet running my business, yet running a podcast, yet working with my team. I mean, it has to happen very dynamically. If I'm not, then I'm going to be stuck. The other reflection of fluidity is the work environment. Prior to COVID, people were wanting to make the shift to having the flexibility to work from anywhere and at any time. Millennials were choosing to do that. They were choosing to leave and pick up and go to a different city, experience that city, still work remotely, and see if they liked it, to test and learn and see if it was a good fit. That's really the default position for many now in their life. And that's carried forward if you think about your phone. Your phone is a reflection of you, and that is constantly changing. The apps that you have, the people you include in your social channels, which is all on your phone, but that blends personal and professional life, the processes, the tools that you use in work today, particularly if you're a freelancer. You have a tool set that you use for your own work. But if you have multiple clients, the tool set that you need to use to support your clients will be potentially very different. And you have to switch between them instantly because you're working on multiple projects, on multiple clients, potentially at any given day. And you may have multiple emails of which you need to switch between all those emails to service your clients at any point in time. So hopefully, as you can see, that at an individual level, and then at a operational level, as well as on a market level, things are not fixed anymore. Things are now fluid. And as such, you have to realize that while everything is changing, you're going to be changing. And that's, much easier, I think, for those that are younger to adapt to because they're already operating that way. But because of that, if the world is in constant motion, you're constantly redefining who you are because you're trying to figure out what fits. And that's natural. And that's going to change depending on where you are in your life stage. That you will need to be able to be fluid in the way you think and the way you do to gain the most traction out of any situation, any circumstance. And the pandemic is a great situation of that. Those that have been able to say, well, this is a situation now. What do I do? How do I pivot? What can I try? What will stick? And let's continue to do that until we find what fits. But for those who are unfortunately feeling stuck because they haven't built up this muscle, it's scary. And it can force you to retract and close in and feel that you don't have a way forward and not know where there could be white space opportunities for you to find a launching pad into something else.
While we have countless examples of career mashups and fluidity in the working world, embracing these concepts is easier said than done for many. People will still struggle with letting go of career expectations and embracing a truly fluid career path. This is why Connie developed her system to address the emotional and operational challenges of career development and help people move towards achieving their career goals. So now we ask Connie to walk through the 5 key components of the system as they are presented in the book.
So, based on everything you've learned and experienced throughout your career and everything that you've just said in terms of observations of where the workforce is going, I know you've channeled these all into a 5-step, basically what you're calling a fluid career system to help people be more fluid and build their own career mashup. So could you talk a little bit about each of these components and how they all fit together?
So this fluid career system really is about strategic planning at the end of the day. To get to where you want to go, you need a plan. I'm sure many of you have heard that. What's the plan? So these 5 components simply are about analysis, planning, and execution. The analysis part is reflected in this very first component. It's really about doing the research and the analysis on a macro and micro level. Macro meaning understand what's going on in the market with competition in your particular industry or the industry that you may want to get into. And figure out, well, what is that information saying? What does it mean? What's the so what in terms of how it applies to you? The micro level is evaluating you. What roles have you enjoyed? What work environments have you liked working in? What do you feel your strengths are? What really interests you at the end of the day? When you take that information, a macro level and a micro level, you're trying to marry the two to see where the white space opportunities are and where you could pivot or where you may want to go. Once you have all that information, it's in the next stage, which is really about planning. It's called creating your compass. The reason why I use the word compass and not say North Star, for example, is that your plan is always going to change. That goal that you set for yourself won't always be fixed. What you want in your 20s is not the same as what you want in your 30s or your 40s. So creating your compass is all about helping you build that strategic plan, identifying those goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics to help you realize that vision that you have. But many times before you start implementing that plan, you have emotions that can hold you back. So the third component is called preparing for change. It's all focused around helping you push past the fear that you may have that is holding you back. Many times it's really this fear of failure and that shame and anxiety that you'll feel if you aren't able to realize that goal you set for yourself. But once you get past that, it's all about execution. And the 2 components that reflect execution are networking. Networking is pretty self-explanatory. You need people to help you get to where you want to go. And you need to learn how to build that village of support. I know networking is uncomfortable for many. It can feel very transactional, but the intent here is to learn how to build authentic relationships. The last piece, building skills. Everybody needs to build skills, build capabilities to achieve what they want. And those skills are not just hard skills, which we all have been familiar with. More importantly, now it's soft skills. To operate in this new world of work, you really need to build those soft skills to create that traction that you need to get your plan going. So at the end of the day, building the business of you is ensuring you're building a strategic plan for yourself. No different than how a corporation, a company runs. They have to have a strategic plan as well.
And with that strategic plan in mind, what would you hope ultimately that people take away from the system and from building the business of you as a whole?
What I really hope is that this creates clarity where it might have felt like chaos, that it helps people build and define a roadmap, a way forward when there isn't clarity on what road to even take. Many may have felt that their windy twists and turns of a journey might not have amounted to something that they feel has given them what they've been looking for. But if you were to take a step back and understand why you might have taken them, what you learned out of them, how they could be leveraged for that next phase, you might not even look at it in a way where it was all for naught. In fact, they might have just been building blocks for you to guide you to where you ultimately want to go.
So to close, given everything you know now and everything you've learned while putting together this book, what advice would you give your younger self and to the next generation of leaders?
I would say, don't be afraid to try new things. Chart your own course, but have a plan behind it. Most importantly, understand who you really are, what value you can bring. See where you can fill those gaps that others may need. It doesn't mean doing a lot of things. It's about being strategic about what those activities are. And say the one last piece is learn to build really strong, authentic relationships. Networking wasn't something that I naturally knew to do, I guess. I didn't really even know how networking worked. All I knew is that I loved meeting people. I loved helping people. It was really not until I started my own consulting business did I get out there and understand the power of networking and building a village of people who expand your knowledge, learning, experiences, and honestly just help fulfill you in a different way. So I'd say that that's my advice.
And with networking in mind, what is the best way that listeners can connect with you?
Well, first, to learn more about the book, you can check out the website, bizofyou.co. That's bizofyou.co. You can follow me on LinkedIn or send me a message and tell me how you'd love to connect and maybe get to know one another. Would be great. Otherwise, you can also send me an email at csteele@flywheelassociates.com. And we're also on various social channels, of which I know we will share in our show notes.
While Alan and I may be biased because we've seen the book come together from the beginning, I can honestly say that I'm truly excited for everyone to read Building the Business of You.
As Connie mentioned earlier, Alexis and I both have our own career mashups, but we didn't identify them for what they were until Connie put a name to them. We've always done these different things, but now we're seeing how our different roles can combine into this new definition of a career.
Exactly. It's great to have this framework to combine everything we do in a way that embraces how all of our different skills and talents can really be our differentiators in the workplace.
Plus, it's not about using your career mashup to land a better job or make more money. It's about doing what you're passionate about and reaching your potential, in whatever form that looks like for you.
So we encourage everyone listening to head over to bizofyou.co to learn more and to get your copy of the book on February 11th. The first 90 people to send us your purchase confirmation email will get an invite to a live career strategy session with Connie. More details on the website.
To get show notes and links from this episode, you can visit us at strategicmomentum.co. And don't forget to follow Strategic Momentum on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Instagram. You can also join the Facebook community by searching Strategic Momentum in groups.
I'm Alexis.
And I'm Alan.
And you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum podcast.